Your testimonies are the most powerful asset your church has in your church marketing arsenal, but they're only good if you can get people to see them in the right timing and provide them the right message. And that's what we're going to talk about today. The method I'm going to share with you is our under the radar method that we use to get our clients' testimonies seen by thousands without relying on website traffic and without growing a huge social media. All of this with the purpose of seeing that God is at work in your church. People can see themselves as being able to be served at in your church, and of course to see that they should check out your church versus another one that may be a wolf in sheep's clothing. We're talking about that today. Let's go.
Welcome to the Best Known Church Show, where we show you how to 10x your reach with church marketing that will help you increase your impact, make more disciples, and become the cornerstone of your community again. This is for the leaders with an outrageous vision, because anything less would be an inaccurate reflection of our Creator. The ones who have unreasonable faith, because you know God works unreasonable miracles. And the ones who are relentless in the pursuit of your calling, because anything less would not make a good and faithful servant. If that's you, you're in the right place. Now, please welcome your host and guide on this journey to become the best known organization in your community, Justin Nava.
Welcome to the Best Known Church Show. My name is Justin, and the point of this show is to take you from being the best kept secret to being the best known organization. If you followed me for any amount of time, you know what I'm about to say next. People should know about your church, your local church gathering, like they know about the local Walmart. Where is it? When is it open? And what can I expect when I go? You know, we used to live 50 years ago in a country that the driveways were empty on Sunday morning. The businesses did not open until noon because there was no business to be had beforehand. And school activities on the weekends or on Wednesday nights were not even whispers. And nowadays, things are totally different. The culture is changing in America, and I honestly think that it is kind of our fault as the church because we've relegated ourselves to be an option, and the purpose of this show is to make you the best known so you're no longer an option in people's spiritual needs and journey. You are the answer, or rather, Jesus is the answer, and your church is the guide. And also the church culture has changed. Church no longer meets on Sunday mornings. Sometimes they meet in homes. Sometimes they meet on Saturday evenings. The church is using whatever it can do to reach people where they are and best serve them based on their needs and the giftings of the church. And that's what this show does. We don't want to make you Hillsong. We don't want to make you Elevation. We don't want to make you Saddleback or Potter's House. We want to make your church the one that's the best known. And that will not happen by copying other churches, as we're going to talk about today. God is working uniquely in your church. He's gifted your church uniquely to uniquely reach a unique group of people, right? Your church was planted, even if it was 80, 100 years ago, because it was this group of people, this family was called to serve this community. And even if you were planted 20 years ago or even 20 days ago, you were planted because the existing churches were not reaching a certain group of people. So there is a unique calling for your church, and you're not going to get there by copying the church across the street or the church across the country. And one of the unique things that you have as a church is your testimonies. These are stories of what God is doing in the lives of your people. I'm not just talking about testimonies of we fed 10,000 people through our food pantry last year. I'm talking about stories of rescue. And I'm not just talking about stories of I was down in the dumps, depressed, addicted, and God rescued me. These could just be stories of God rescuing a normal, everyday family from financial burden, from hurt, from depression, anxiety, from the misleadings of the enemy and running a family. Whatever this looks like, these can be quote unquote mundane testimonies. Sometimes those work even better. So if you're in a church, if you're leading a church and you're like, I don't know, we don't have any drug addicts that God has rescued. We don't have any abusers that God has rescued. Like that's okay. My story is not one of those either, but here we are, God using us, you and me, to reach out, and he's using us as tools for his kingdom work. So when I talk about testimonies, let's clear this up right now, okay? I'm talking about stories of God in your congregation. It is not necessarily, does not have to necessarily be a direct result of your church, like, hey, I went to this church and talked to the pastor and I got plugged into this program. Look how great it is. Like, no, we want all the attention to be on Jesus and Jesus rescuing through your church. So like your church doesn't even have to be mentioned like, hey, this is such a great church, 5-star review, funny pastor, friendly people. We don't want stories like that. Okay, we want stories that honestly reflect, I was lost and now I'm found, and now I get to experience pure joy and abundant living through Christ, who was introduced to me through this church. Something like that, okay? If you ever go to a church, if you just search local churches in your area, and you see a 5-star review and you read it and it says funny pastor, friendly people, great coffee or whatever, everyone knows pastor's wife wrote that review. Or if you see something like great music, had a good time, we'll come back again, right? Everyone knows the worship pastor or the youth pastor wrote something like that. Those are generic reviews. Those are not the reviews we're talking about today, okay? We want to use reviews, these 5-star reviews that you see. We want them to reflect the testimonies of your church. Now, why do we want to use reviews to share our testimonies? Okay, first, let me talk to you a little bit about the psychology of how people make decisions in choosing a church. It's honestly very similar to the way that we make any decision in our lives. And this could be big decisions like what home to buy or what car to purchase or even where to live, what job to pursue. We even do this with tiny decisions like what am I going to drink in the next 24 hours, or what am I going to buy at the grocery store? What restaurant are we going to go to? Okay. There is power in reviews because of this simple fact. People will believe what they hear others say about you, but they won't necessarily hear what you say about yourself. Or I can flip that. People will hear what you say about yourself, but they'll believe what others say about you. I like that one better, okay? We call this social proof. I don't remember if this is a marketing term or if it started as a psychological term, but we've all seen this live it out in our own relationships, okay? You've probably told your spouse or even a friend, you've probably mentioned something to them. Oh, this restaurant I want to go to, this product I want to try, this subscription I want to try, this gym I want to try. Whatever it is, you've probably said something and they were like, oh, that's nice. Maybe we'll try it later. Or, oh, that's good. It's nice for you, but I don't know if that's for me. And then they hear about it from someone else and they're like, oh, Steve just told me about this amazing thing. I just tried it. It's awesome. And you're like, I've been telling you to try that for years. Why didn't you listen to me? My wife is a pro at that. Love her to death. I'll tell her, hey, we should try this. We should try this. You should try this. Blah, 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 blah. I'm just white noise. But a friend, her best friend or a colleague says it's working. She goes out and buys 10 cases of it. And I'm like, we could have been doing this a year ago. She's a pro at it. And I love her for it. So this social proof is, we can hear what we say about ourselves. Hey, I want this. Okay, well, yeah, you want it. So of course you're going to say it's good for us. But if she hears it from someone else, a third party who's often seen more objectively, then we believe it, and we're more likely, when I say we, I mean humans, we're more likely to act upon that. It's the power of testimony. It's why when you watch infomercials, it's not just the chop, chop, chop guy talking. It also goes to professional chefs. It goes to stay-at-home moms. It goes to moms of families of 8. It goes to food kitchen volunteers saying, this changed our lives, and you may remember the chop, chop, chop guy, but what's going to convince you to call that number and order a chopper and get one free with all the accessories and then buy all the upsells is the testimonies of those other people, because you're not like the chop chop guy. Okay, I'm sure everyone's screaming in their phone right now because they know his name and I don't. But you're going to remember because, hey, I do cook a lot in the kitchen, or I do have a big family, or I do hate cutting myself when I'm trying to chop. I can't chop garlic for the life of me. I need that chopper. Yeah, I need me that chopper. So we use this in marketing. There's no reason we can't take advantage of this as the church and position our what others are saying about us as a way to convince, compel, or persuade someone that our church is not only worth paying attention, it's worth coming to. And not only that, Testimonies take it a step further to say, Jesus wasn't just a person that walked the earth and said some nice things. He's an actual life-changing creator that is a redeemer like no other, if that makes sense. So we want to share these reviews at a time when people are most likely to listen, to act upon them, to take them to heart, and really make a decision based on them. And that's when people are searching for churches, okay? But reviews, like I said, to finish this off with reviews before we go into actually using them for your church, reviews show that people like you or people like me use the product, and if they like it, then I'll probably like it. It's why we often, the best ways to share our Jesus are through our own testimonies. I realize I'm a little short on the camera. I'm going to tilt it down just a bit. There we go. The reviews show that if this person liked it and I'm like this person, then I must like it. Okay. And so if Jesus changed this person and this person's my friend because I'm like them, then maybe Jesus can help me, right? Our best ways of sharing the gospel often start with God's work in our life, and then that goes into the salvation redeeming aspect of the gospel. And so that's the power of reviews. Now let's talk about what it looks like for the church to use reviews, to call people to her, to make sure that when people feel that pull of God or they're interested in a church to learn more, to work out their relationship with their creator, they're not convinced to go to a wolf in sheep's clothing who says, look at our bright shows, our big kids programs, aren't we so great? We can use our reviews to say, look at Jesus and what he did in our lives, and isn't he so great? And you can have that real, meaningful, sustainable relationship through our church. Well, let's talk about what that looks like. So this is the power of testimonies in reviews. Okay, so reviews are simply what others are saying about us, and reviews are usually what's the word I'm looking for? Systematized, processed. They are set in a way that is presentable. Okay, so when I say reviews, I'm talking about Google reviews, Facebook reviews, Yelp reviews, what people are saying about us on your website. There might be a section called what people are saying about us. There's a section in Facebook, but people can also post on your Facebook profile, share some stories about what happened, or even what they share on Facebook. Okay. Now, the difference between a review and a testimony is obviously a testimony has a spiritual aspect to it. And it's not necessarily like all testimonies can be reviews, but not all reviews are testimonies. Okay. Going back to the introduction of the show, a review can simply be 5 stars, great worship music, easy parking, the coffee was good, the pastor was funny. That's a review. That's not a testimony. Okay. But a testimony is, I was having a hard time. I couldn't afford rent. This church helped me out. This church helped me manage my family, get them together. And now we're actually a fully functional, well-living family because this church showed us that being a family is not just a contract with the government, but it's an actual relationship that's a reflection of our creator, right? That's a long testimony and maybe not the best review, but it's still a testimony that can be used as a review. 5 stars, because if I'm having trouble with my marriage and I'm turning to church, I may see myself in that review and say, well, this church obviously helps families. My family needs help. Let me go see that church and see what that church can do with me. This is why testimonies make the best reviews. Because again, happy family, friendly pastor, good coffee, that can be any church. Okay. But again, your church was uniquely planted and uniquely equipped to uniquely reach a unique group of people. So you need unique testimonies in your review. Okay. So not only that, here's the best part. Here's the whole point of today's episode, the under the radar method to get your testimony seen by more people. Your testimonies can be shared without needing them or people to come to your website, and you don't need them to follow you on social media. Okay. How is this possible? You're not going to be driving around with a bullhorn. Listen to what Jesus did. Right? Come outside. You're not going to try and trick people walking around with and people think, oh, the ice cream guy's here. And it's just you outside on a bullhorn. We're not talking about that. Okay. We're talking about using reviews, which are publicly accessible, often seen when people are in the mood of, or in the vibe, or in the call of looking for a church. I don't want to say in the mood for looking for a church, but I'm saying like they feel God's pull. I'm moving. I need a church. Something is happening in our church. We need to find someone that can better serve us. Okay, I'm not talking about church shopping. I don't want to transplant the saints. I want to grow the kingdom. But sometimes churches just have a falling, and someone needs to be better served somewhere else, or there's an incident. I don't want to talk about why someone needs to leave a church, but if that's the case, they need to find one that's better equipped to serve them. They need to find one, maybe they've been given a revelation and they realize their church isn't really a church. It's just a motivational conference. And they're like, I need to find some real Jesus in my life. Okay. Whatever that is, they're going to go searching for churches. The number one thing they're going to look at, again, they're going to hear what you say, but they're going to believe what others say. And the best objective source for that are online reviews, Google reviews, Facebook reviews. We got reviews in Apple now, pulling from Yelp. Okay. What are others saying about you? And we could go even a step further, which we'll talk about in about 3 weeks. We're going to talk about public relations, and they can see what others are reporting on you. And we have a way to put your best foot forward on that. But again, that's 3 weeks down the line, because if you can't get this, you're not going to get that. All right. This is a process. We got to build the outside of the puzzle before we go fill in the inside. Okay. So the reviews that are out there, the platforms that are out there, Google, Yelp, Facebook, those are the big ones, okay? You can go even to the tinier ones, the denominational ones, but that's where you get more into the transplant of the saints. What I want to talk about is Google reviews, Facebook reviews, Yelp reviews. Those are the big three. People are going to check those because everyone is going to check Google. Everyone has Facebook. Not everyone's going to click through to your website. The data shows this. We could get 1,000 impressions for a church, but only 100 clicks. Because people are going to see the church, they're not going to click through. But we can see how many reviews are left, how many people are checking the reviews, clicking through because of the reviews, reading the reviews, clicking on the profile, seeing where the church is. We can see all that happen. And guess what? The more quality reviews that you have across the internet, Google being the most important one, if you just focus on one, they say just focus on one or two social media platforms, just focus on one review platform. Google's going to be the biggest one. You are going to get more people to see not only your church, but God moving in your church through your testimonies. Now, we're going to get into how to get those testimonies into reviews, how to ask for reviews without sounding desperate, and how to get those reviews in a way that's not friendly church, happy people, been here all my life, isn't this so great? But actually, I once was lost, but now I'm found. And this is how that church helped me in this process. Okay, the other thing that's very powerful, we're going to talk about that in a minute. The other thing that's very powerful about reviews is that they're accessible through any platform. I don't need to be logged into Facebook to see your Google review. I don't even need to be logged into Google to see your Google review. Okay, I can be in my Apple Maps looking for just what church is near me. I click on that and I'm seeing reviews on you that they're pulling from Yelp. Okay, I hope my information on that is right, but that's my understanding of what happens here and what my team is doing. Okay, so when we go out and look at these platforms, I don't need them to be on my website. I don't need them to be following me on social media. I just need them to be looking for a church. Okay, and they will see our testimonies. And again, the testimonies, remember this, guys, the testimonies are the most important asset because people will hear what we say about ourselves, but they'll believe what others are saying about us. And especially when it comes to Jesus, we're going to come off as manipulative and hypey, like, look at Jesus, isn't this so great? Look at us, we're so great. But if someone comes alongside and says, look, I've tasted and I've seen, this church is it. Okay? And if I can see someone that looks like me, if I can see a husband that says this is great for my family, if I can see a wife, if my wife can see a woman that says this is a safe and secure kids program, if my dad can see a review that says that my church left me behind, but this one is still in tune with the gospel and singing classic hymns that I can worship to without distraction and feel that personal connection like I had when I was younger, my dad would go to that church, okay? Because that's the kind of church he's yearning for, all right? So the review can show that people like me are going there. And that is something that if you, by the way, you should be asking this, total set aside here. In your new members orientation, your assimilation class, whatever you call it, you should be asking people what made you choose our church. What was that decision process like? Most of the time, what our clients share is that people say, I saw people that looked like me. It looked like you understood me. The way you talked showed that you jived well with me, essentially. Okay. So that's why we need pictures on the platform. That's why we need to focus on our messaging to speak to these people. So they say, you didn't sound like every other church. So I know you're not going to treat me like every other church, and every other church has burned me, abused me, left me to hang on dry, or just asked me until I had nothing left to give. and Jesus wasn't the focus. So if you want to get people like that on board, guess what? You've got to sound like no other church. And the best way to do that, share your testimonies so people can see that people like them are being changed in the church, and your church is the guide in their spiritual journey. So let's get into the meat of this, the good stuff, the stuff that, pastors tell me, Justin, I know this all sounds great, but how do I do this? Look, you've got to ask for the reviews. Very few people are going to go out of their way to leave a review unsolicited, okay? And 2 out of 3 of those people are going to be doing it because they hate you, they're mad at you, they're disappointed, you did something to rub them the wrong way, and it's going to be a negative review. So one of the ways that we get ahead of that, it actually is a preventative measure. We're not drowning those negative reviews out. We're helping them not happen because the reviews we do have didn't give them a false impression of what they should expect, okay? So we got to ask for the reviews. Not only that, you've got to ask multiple times, all right? You're asking for a favor, essentially, okay? So treat it that way, all right? This is not a tithe and offering. This is not a spiritual discipline. It's help people discover our church, help people see that our church is for them, for the community, and that Jesus is here waiting for them, and help us show that God is really on the move here. And your testimony can share what our church's heart truly is, okay? Like, all that sounds great, but I'm going to forget by the time I hit the lunch table at my grandmother's house, because that's the bomb, right? So I'm going to forget. So you got to ask me again. Okay. And you don't have to ask me the same way. Hey, Justin, did you do that thing? Just remind me. Hey, by the way, did you fill this out? It's an email I could get. Okay. But you got to ask for reviews, and you're probably going to have to ask more than once. So don't tell me, Justin, I asked for reviews and no one left them. My first question is going to be, how many times did you ask them? All right. As with anything, what you do has to fit within the vision of your church and the mission of your church. God gives you the vision that sets the mission. That's what I believe. So if you're asking for reviews, it needs to fit within the mission. Otherwise, you're just being hype motivational. Okay. So if your mission is to make disciples who make disciples, how can reviews fit into that? Well, it showcases that we are a church that cares about people. If they know we care about them, they're going to be more open to what we would call discipleship. They may just be called being nice, being good Christians, whatever it is. All right. And your testimonies in your reviews can reflect that. But let's get into actually how to ask for those reviews. Number one, the most important thing is you got to get people in a testimony mindset. All right. If you just ask them for a 5-star review, 2 things are going to happen. Number one, actually 3 things are going to happen. Number one, they're just going to forget and never do anything. But number 2, if they do leave the review, they're just going to click the 5-star and they're going to click submit. That's it. Okay. 5-star reviews with no context are virtually unusable. They're kind of useless for you other than boosting up your vanity review metrics. Okay. The third thing they're going to do, if you just ask for a review, hey, can you give us a review on Google so more people can see how great our church is? You're going to get a review that says, happy people, friendly pastor, love my group. I recommend this church 5 stars. Okay. Again, good, not ideal. Okay. So I'm not saying go delete those reviews. In fact, most of the time you can't, but you want really good reviews. So the first thing you got to do is ask the person, have you ever told someone about your testimony? Okay. Now, as a pastor, I don't want you to complicate this, but I am going to give you a couple ideas here. Number one, I think every pastor needs to do this every 3 or 4 years. You need to do a sermon series or some kind of seasonal celebration of what God's done in your church, and get people to think about their testimonies, okay? As church has become, I'm going to get in trouble for this, as church, or I should say, as we've allowed church to become more consumeristic, people are coming in saying, what can the church do for me next? Instead of, what has the church done for me? What has Jesus done for me? Or what has Jesus done through me? It doesn't always have to be I was changed. It could be God used me to change someone else. Right? That's a good testimony as well. So I love it to see churches that once a year is probably as frequent as I would get. All right. And that's really if you have a large churn, if you're a military church or a port church or like a South Padre church, like you got a lot of turnover because people are coming and going. once a year is probably as frequent as I would go, but every 2 or 3 years, have your congregation sit and reflect. What has God done in the last 2 or 3 years? What's your testimony been like? How is it updated? How has it changed? How is it reflected? Everybody's constantly surrendering. Everyone's constantly needing rescuing from Jesus. So your church testimony could fluctuate quite a bit, and it's a good thing, I think, okay? But you need to actually get people to think about their testimony first, okay? Because not everyone has a testimony. Now, if you can go back, if I was a good podcast host or video host, I would have this information already. But you can go back in the Best Known Church Show archives, and you can actually find a show I did where I went through how to get people to formulate their testimonies in a way that resonates with others. So it's not just, yeah, I sucked, and then Jesus came, and now I'm better. Okay, that's a very selfish testimony. It's true, but it sounds selfish. But instead looking at what was my situation. I was, but then God, now I, fill in the blanks. That's a great testimony. I mean, that's like baseline. You may have your own formula method. That's just the one that I recommend. I'm a marketer, so that's the way I think, but you're a pastor, you know your people better, you know what's going to resonate with your community better, so you can do something better with them. But get people thinking about their testimony. Once they have their testimony, and it doesn't have to be polished, okay, they don't have to give you a one-liner of their testimony, verbatim, the same 5 times consistently, but once you feel like they do have an idea of, hey, I appreciate you sharing that testimony. Now, would you mind sharing it on Google as a 5-star review or whatever stars you think we should have, because people could see that and see that God can rescue them just like he rescued you. Oh, absolutely, Pastor. Now I don't have to make up a review. I've already thought about it. I've already recognized it. And when I write the review and I see it written, then maybe I'll actually make it look good. Although sometimes you don't even have to make it look good. Some of the best reviews we have, I have a review page on a church. It was very hard for us because we did screenshots. We didn't copy paste them. We did screenshots of all the reviews this church has. There's more misspelled words than there are correctly spelled words, but it's the culture of that church. It's the area of that church. They don't punctuate correctly. It drives me personally nuts, but for them it works. And so I told my team, I was like, don't fix it. We're screenshotting it. We're putting it up there because that's what's going to resonate, to show, again, these people are like me. I don't got all my stuff together. These people don't got all their stuff together, but Jesus is still working through them. Therefore, he must work through me. If I try to polish it up, I'm now inserting myself into this church or my team into this church, and they're going to look at that and say, well, they obviously got everything together, and this place ain't for me. I hope that makes sense. So we don't want to make it too polished, okay? We're not making a Francis Chan video here. We're not putting this on Right Now Media. We're not making a video of it even. It's a written testimony, okay? And then they can put it in Google review, Facebook review, Yelp review. I don't like to do them all at once. If you're doing this every 2 or 3 years, change the platform up a little bit. All right. You also don't have to go plaster it everywhere at once. That's extra and that's encouraged. But again, it's a lot to ask your people to do unless you're actually doing a whole day of it. Okay. This could also be a ministry event. Okay. It could be something you do in your groups. And then you can end it with, now let's spend some time sharing our testimonies in these reviews, again, so that people can see the work of God in our church when they're looking for something, okay? Again, it sounds I can understand. In fact, I had a conversation a couple weeks ago with a young gentleman who was like, this is icky, man. Like, this is like we're manipulating people, and I get it, right? The same could be said for using a PA system at the church, right? It sounds icky, right? Like we're broadcasting the pastor. We're doing fancy music, like we're doing lighting now. We're turning the lights down. It's all for the purpose of putting attention on God to try to do whatever it takes to make sure that eyes are on him and not on ourselves. And so if we're looking at the things we want in a church, I want to be comfortable. I want to have hot coffee and donuts and cool stuff for my kids. But if I don't have my eyes on God, then I'm going to be let down, or I'm going to be led astray. Or I'm going to be disappointed when I go to your church expecting hype and smoke machines, but instead I get traditional service. And so I'm let down and I'm like disappointed because I had expectations that you didn't correct, if that makes sense. So So I like to take a time, again, a season, sermon series, group study, curriculum, whatever, or even just like, hey, we're going to have a picnic as a church and we're going to really think about our testimonies. And then at the end, we're going to text you a link and you can share that testimony on your on our review pages. Now, that doesn't work for a large church. That works for an incredibly small church, like less than 50, that last idea, because if you hammer all these reviews at once, Google's not going to take you serious. Okay. So that's why I'm a bigger fan of doing it in a way that's a little bit more organic. Now, there's a couple ways to do that more organically. Number one is just ask in person. But again, people are going to forget. You're going to have to remind them more than once. You're going to forget. It becomes a hard thing. So it's fine to start with. But my real favorite is to actually create a system. And if you can, automate it so that people get reminded without you having to think about it. Okay. This usually starts with your core, not your launch team, although if your church plant launch team, but pastor, let's be honest, there's a good core 10 to 20 to 30 people in your church that you're like, these are our ride or die. They're third generation. They've been at our church for years. They're planted in this community. Like their word is bond. So let's get their reviews. Like start with them. All right. And then you can branch out into the rest of your congregation or I should say, and implement it as part of your new member orientation, assimilation, whatever that is, process that, you want to hear why they chose your church, what spoke to them differently about their church. Has God already worked in them through your church, right? Like if they're getting baptized and now they're becoming a new member, like obviously there's a story there. And then as part of the new member orientation, one of the classes, one of the days, or one of the time slots is, let's talk about what your testimony is and let's see how we can best share that for more people to see, so God can be given the glory and people can be persuaded that God can do something for them here. Okay. I love implementing it there for new guests. I don't always like doing it for guests because you don't know what they're going to say. And there is a method where you can filter bad reviews from good reviews before you give them the link to review, but that's pretty much frowned upon, if not illegal by this point. So we don't recommend it. But the way that we do that is we do ask guests, what was your experience like? And we at least get some information there and we use that to follow up with them. And then that conversation may turn into a review request, but it just depends on what that conversation looks like. But we don't go in there specifically to solicit a review in that process. But that's a whole different thing that's a little bit more advanced. So what I like to do is get them in that and then create a system. If it's automated, if you use software to do this, great. But what you do is I'm going to text you this link. And if you don't see the review, you can send them a reminder the next week. This could all be tracked in the spreadsheet, and you're just manually sending texts or manually sending emails. You could do it automated. Like we've got a system. We send them a link. If they click it, we know they clicked it, and we double check for their review. If they didn't leave a review, we send them a follow-up. If they didn't click the link, we send them a follow-up. If they never respond, we tell the pastor, hey, this person hasn't responded. Just want to make sure everything's okay. Maybe you want to check in with them. If they're going to church when they're not responding to this, sometimes they just think it's a scam. Totally understandable. I don't blame them at all. All right. All that said, having a process. So you're not just getting a bunch of testimonies, and then in 2 years, I'm not seeing any new testimonies. I'm just seeing a bunch of testimonies from 2023. I see that right now, where someone obviously made an effort, and there's 5 testimonies. 4 of them are from 2021. And that's it. And I'm like, what's this church been doing for 2 years? So you want to have a way that you're constantly asking for new reviews on new platforms, or just, anyone that joins the church, put them in a process where, okay, they get their certificate of membership or baptism or whatever you give them. And then a week later, we ask them for their testimony. Have they thought about it? Maybe we do a testimony class on the website. I'm a huge fan of putting resources on the website. And then once they figure out their testimony, then we can encourage them to share it in a review. It all needs to be part of a system to get this taken care of. And that's really what we've created in our system. We call the Be Represented methodology, where we help churches, our clients specifically, not only get 5-star reviews, but 5-star reviews that share the work that God is doing, so people can trust that local church and be persuaded to visit that one versus another church that's really a motivational concert, a wolf in sheep's clothing, or it's just going to lead them astray, or quite frankly, can't be equipped to serve them. Because if I say good music, funny pastor, and I go there and it's a it's not, let's just be honest, right? Then I'm let down because I went for one thing when I should have been going for another thing. So you want to make sure that you follow some kind of system, so you're always asking for reviews. You're always doing it in a way that shows testimony of Jesus over really review of the church. And you want to make sure it's in places that are publicly accessible. Yes, these can go on your website. Yes, you can make social posts out of these, but they really need to be in those publicly accessible places. Number 1, Google. Number 2, Yelp. Number 3, Facebook. If I had to put them in order, I would put them in that order. Okay. Now, once they see your reviews, pastor, church leader, once they see your reviews, they're going to be like, let me check out this church. I think maybe this is the one we need to go to. They're going to go to your website. You want to make sure you make the best impression. For that, go to navachurchwebsite.com. This is a free resource. You can get the same homepage framework. This is your first impression. This is like when people walk into your foyer. Church decorators, interior volunteers, whatever you want to call them, they often spend the most time in the foyer or the entryway, because that's going to be your first impression, right? There's usually a whole separate team that's managing the sanctuary. That's where you're going to spend the most time, but you're going to spend the most time after you made your first impression. You want to have a good first impression on your website when people click through to learn more about your church. They see God in your testimonies. They need to see Jesus and God on your website as well, because it's a little discombobulating if they see a testimony that says, I once was lost, but then God found me, and now I'm saved, and now I'm living my best, most abundant, peaceful, joyous life. And they click through your website, and it's just Sunday service at 10. Look how great we are. Don't you want to click through this? Don't you want to go to this potluck? Don't you want to sign up for this? Hey, click here for this. It's very confusing. It's very discombobulating. You're like, I thought this was a Jesus place, but all they're trying to do is ask for my money or get me to sign up for something. It's very confusing. Go to navachurchwebsite.com. You won't have that issue. www.navachurchwebsite.com. You can get the framework we use that brings more people. When we implement this framework, even if we do nothing else, we see way more people not only staying on the website to see more information, but we actually see more people coming through the doors of the church. This is one piece of the puzzle of the entire definitive church marketing method, but it is one of our best pieces, and that's why we're giving it to you for free. So, imagine that someone comes to your church and they're not just looking for good worship and a great kids ministry, but they're actually looking for this Jesus that they've heard about. They actually don't come in here and say, what's this church all about? I don't know about this. I'm just on the fence. But they actually come in and say, I'm hungry to learn more, because there's obviously something different about this church. And not only that, imagine they never had to go to your website. They never had to go to your social media profile, follow you. They're coming to you completely out of the blue, but somehow they already know that God is at work in your church, and they can trust that your church can help and serve and support them in their own spiritual journey. That's what can happen when you utilize everything you can. What you're willing to do, whatever it takes to get more people to see Jesus and connect with him in relationship, through a relationship with your church. To do that, we use this under the radar method. It's a fantastic method. Not, as far as I know, no one else is doing this the way that we're doing it. We call it the Be Represented system. So your homework is to basically start thinking about, how can I implement this? What does this look like? Who can I talk? What's the first person I can talk to say, hey, do you mind sharing your testimony here so more people can see that God's at work in our church and be persuaded to visit us versus another church? And I'm not saying you want to compete with other churches. You want to compete with, I'm going to say it, other wolves in sheep's clothing, or other churches that aren't really churches, that are preaching a false gospel. You want people to connect that are spiritually hungry and really looking for God. You want them to connect with your church and to see that God is working at your church, instead of being deceived and led astray, going to another, I don't even want to call them churches. That's why I keep saying wolves in sheep's clothing, motivational concerts. They go to those churches. They don't get what they need. They're fed Triscuits instead of steak. And they're like, well, this church thing didn't pan out. Let me continue looking at other religions, other worldly solutions. And they missed out on your church because you didn't do whatever it takes to share the gospel with them, share what Christ is doing with you in your church. And instead, they need to see what God's doing in your church. And that means you got to do whatever it takes, not just update your website, not just post more on social media, but use all tools at our disposal. And one of those is reviews. If this made complete sense, even if it made a little sense, like and subscribe to this wherever you're watching. I'd love it if you left a review of yourself. What did I show you? Don't just say this host. I'm glad I listened to the audio because I checked out the video and he was disgusting, 1 star. If you got to put something like that, be honest, be yourself. But those reviews obviously help in every way for this show. I want to see 1 million churches become the cornerstone of their communities. I want people to know the local church like they know their local Walmart. I don't want local churches that are doing God's good work to be the best kept secret. I want them to go from unknown to best known. And one of the best ways you can do that is to show the algorithm that this is important. So like it, subscribe it, leave a review wherever you are. And I will see you guys next week. God bless.
That's going to do it for today's episode of the Best Known Church Show with Justin Nava. Be sure to subscribe to stay updated on the latest news, strategies, and resources that you need to reach 10x more people and become the best known in your community. To send us a message or leave a voicemail for Justin to be played on a future show, visit thebestknownchurchshow.com. And if you'd like to work with us so you can focus on your ministry, give us a call at 832-861-7654. Until next time, stay outrageous, unreasonable, and relentless.